All right, this is Roger from Mud Fossil University. Very serious subject today on the actual nature of matter itself. And I dispute the current atomic model completely. And I uploaded this paper today up on academia.edu, and it's called Electron Flood Theory Replaces Neutrons. My contention is there is no neutrons. None. Zero ever. And there never will be. So I'm saying beware. I contest the existence of neutral particles. There is none. I also claim all atomic interactions are explained if the mass of a neutron is replaced with an equal mass of electrons. So if the neutrons go away and electrons flood in, the case is closed. And until this basic matter is understood, nothing at all will ever be correct. Nothing. Zero. Nothing at all. And that is the current state of affairs. Matter, physics, geology, all hinges on understanding the absolute basic principles of matter which are not understood right now. Now, this is a broad theory at this point. I will just display everything that you're going to see, all this stuff. I'm not just giving you a theory. I will show my evidence, and it is conclusive. After that, the beam counters can do their job of figuring out the little bits and pieces, what they all add up to, and their potentials, and their electron volts, and their atomic mass units, and all that business. All right. So the details need much research. But this is very, very, very well supported. Now, the neutron replacement also explains even nuclear explosions. Okay, because there is no neutrons. The electrons are 1,800 times more energetic than protons by mass. That's what they claim. Now, all these things need to be completely re-examined now, because they've always interpreted all these things on the basis of a neutron-infested nucleus, and that is impossible. There is no neutrons; they'd fall off. They already have a weak part of this and a strong force and a this and a that, and it's all gobbledygook to say that, to cover the fact that there is no neutrons. If there was no neutrons, every bit of those protons would be completely flooded with negative particles, like a snowball of electrons, and every electron is a snowflake, swarming around several marbles, which are the protons, stuck to them solidly, just like two magnets do, a positive to a negative, locked together until it exceeds its capability to accept any more electrons. Then they stack up in orbitals. Now, I'm going to go over, I have, this is excruciating details. There's 55 points here, and every one of them is supported by some evidence, some actual evidence. All right, so get a bowl of popcorn, let's get started. Okay, my electron flood theory, I will show you light acceleration seen in actual pictures, total impossible to miss it. Cerenkov radiation seen, electron neutrinos seen, charged particle carriers, which is the boson particle streaming through air, seen, magnetic fields surrounding the boson particle in the ether, which they say doesn't exist, but it does, and that is also seen, polarized ether, which is seen, the Higgs field, I don't know if I have it up in here, but the Higgs field, which is the magnetic field surrounding the boson carrier, is seen, right-hand rule of electrons flowing to the right as they spin through a magnetic field is seen, electronic interactions of every single type, 100% are accounted for with this electron flood theory. Gravity, anti-gravity, all seen, and you even see anti-gravity from a nuclear bomb. And I'll explain and show everything in extreme, excruciating details. All right, now I want you to look at this very carefully. This is a pulsed red laser, and these are the pulsed particles that are breaking through the air, similar to shock waves and sonic booms created from a jet engine, or I mean a jet aircraft or whatever kind of aircraft breaking through the sound barrier. It literally cracks the space in front and it energizes it. And what it's done here is energized all of the electrons that are the charged particles in the air, free electrons just floating around trying to get wherever they can feel comfortable. And sometimes they'll be on you as static, sometimes they'll be attached to particles that are in the air in this case, and I'm sure this was in a moist condition area. There's no extra vapors used here, this is just the particles in the air, but they become polarized and energized due to the extreme movement of a blast of intense light. This is not just normal light. This is light that has a little more energy than normal light. So as it cracks through the particles that are in front of it, they energize. And as they energize, they throw off light, and they throw off a field, and that field energizes the particles that are the ether. That is the ether exists. It's something that they say doesn't exist. It absolutely 100% exists. I'm going to show it in its extreme details. All right, this is the light disk that was coming through just normally, the pulse laser, being crushed into a Venturi, which is two metal cylinders, small, and they create two airplane wings that force this to restrict itself into a highly compressed state where everybody is in each other's business. They're all pushing into each other's regions, and that is not allowed. When that happens, they become highly energetic and they start fighting literally like a fist fight, and they push each other away violently. And at that point they accelerate because they have to get out of there. They turn into white Cherenkov radiation, creating a reverse EMF. You see that all the way back here? See that? That's not supposed to be out there. It's coming this way. Well, this created an enormous reaction to this. That's why this field is way out here. So that's something to remember. And you can see all the little lines, and then they come all the way in, but they're so powerful that they don't start to show up real well until you get out here. Now, once they come through here, they're in an atomized plasma state. Everybody is in each other's fields, and that is not allowed. You have to get out of the other guy's fields. They do not want to interact with each other. They're negative particles. Now, what happens then? They explode out of that tiny restricted space back into unrestricted space, and it is an actual collision into a different medium, from the restricted high speed to an unrestricted smash, just like Cherenkov radiation in a nuclear reactor, going from the reaction area into the heavy water. Now, you see how it steps down? Right here it breaks. That's the quantum distance where they start to reform their disks, and then they come back into their own showers, which say, get away from me, you get away from me, you get away from me, and they start to splay into these fibers that come out. And that is what they're considering to be the Cherenkov radiation, which creates electron neutrinos, which it looks exactly like these big fluffy particles, and I'll show you in a minute. And at that point, these are the boson particles, which are charged particles called charge carriers, and they soon go flying through space, crashing through the space, creating at their tip a magnetic field called a Higgs field. So it's a Higgs boson, the boson particle with the Higgs field around it, and they flow through space, and I will show you that. And they've been seen in outer space too. The tether incident and John Glenn saw the exact same things. So that's highly accelerated light. Now, and that's done with a red pulse laser. Now let me show you what happens looking down at that slit. Looking straight down into it, these are boiling electrons. They are fighting each other like gladiators. And now, as they come away from each other, allowed out of that restricted, compressed, chaotic, violent energetic maelstrom of particles, they begin to settle into the lower energy colors. And you'll see some of them crossing each other's regions. That is not going to be allowed for very long. They will become to be pretty much straightforward spinning particles. And let's go on and I'll show you that stuff. Now, I just want to mention to you something. I get a little, I guess you'd call it a little hostile sounding every now and then about the reactions that I've encountered over the last many years, and the last 6 years in particular, by the people that we are trusting to teach us what is true. And it's their obligation, in my eyes, and I would say in a court of law, it would be their obligation to act in the best interest of students and teach them what is really true. And if I can support this against their theories, which have no basis, then I think something has to be looked at. And when you see what's coming up at the end of this tape, you will freak out. In addition to that, I want you to please subscribe, and please get this to your professors and your teachers and the ones that you trust to tell you and that you're paying. I'm sure there's a lot of students out here going to hopefully see this. And you should confront them and say, I'd like to know what about this. I'm paying you a lot of money to teach me what's real. And if this has an impact on that, I'd certainly like to know. Can you please email me back with your assessment of this information? This relates to my future. You as a student. I have no horse in this. None. It's all up to you people. But I'm just showing you what is real, and I've been doing it for years, and nobody's paying attention, and that impacts so much of your reality you just won't even believe it. So stay tuned, my friend. The rest is coming up now. Alright, now remember I told you light comes down and it spins around in a circle like this. And as it's coming forward, if it spins this way, and through the slit, there's a slit right here. If it spins this way through the slit, it collects up on this side. So it depends on where it's hitting, whether it's hitting here, 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 here. If it comes over the top and goes through the slit, it comes off on this side. That's what accounts for the two sides of the it's not a wave coming up and down of nothing. It's the particle at the tip of a spinning vortex. And there was a guy in 1644 that knew this. Has actually drawn apart. It's the same thing. Same thing. I'll show you. It'll blow your mind. Blew my mind. At some point, and I may have already talked about bosons, which are the particles, and the Higgs fields, which surround the boson particle. Now, I'm saying this right here, looking into the Venturi slit coming towards us. The accelerated light is here, highly energized, as you can see. Everybody's in each other's regions saying, get away from me, and they're accelerated. These are the tiny little trails, and at the tips of these trails are these charge fields. So the particle is a charged negative carrier, fumes coming out. You see how they're all evenly spaced away from each other? They don't want to be in each other's regions. They want to get away from each other. So they're spinning through space very quickly, just like electricity is in a wire, only we're visualizing it in space. It's really the exact same thing. If we were inside a wire, we would see the identical same events occurring, really, literally. Because you'd be outside the wire out here, because the particle is really in the dead center of this thing, and we're never going to see it because it's so tiny. What we are seeing is the field which is illuminating. And if you can see the dot, 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 the only reason those dots are showing up there is because there's a polarization there. And what do I mean by that? I mean there's a bar magnet in each one of these. And how did the bar magnet get there? Well, the bar magnet is there because particles in the air literally have electrons attached to other matter, and when it goes through there, the electrons and the other matter sets up like primarily it's moisture, because they're highly polar moisture molecules. H2O, extremely polar molecule, and they attach to electrons because the electrons are, if it's moist out, you don't get static electricity. If it's moist in the air, the static drips off you and gets in the air, and that's what you're seeing here. Rodney was in Australia, and I think he's probably pretty close to to the ocean, and it was somewhere, I don't know, it looked like that in the pictures. You sent me a lot of other pictures, and so I assume there was probably a lot of moisture in the air, which has given us a very good display of the magnetic fields. But those are the fields, and they call those the Higgs fields, that surround the boson charged particle carrier, which comes as an electron neutrino, which they say, from Cherenkov white radiation. It's all there. Every single bit of the thing is there that they talk about. So, now, see that white particle there? That is a disastrous thing for one of these. That turns into one of these, but as it does, it crashes into it because it's highly accelerated to compare it to this. And I don't know really, I can't really tell you any much more about that, other than what it ends up doing. I don't know how come it came out in such an extreme power condition, but they do this occasionally. At any rate, this is the result. That was that white particle. It interacts with another normal field. These are fields. Now, don't forget. This is. I'm saying there's a particle. Well, it's a condensed field. It looks like to me, but I know there's a particle in there somewhere because they all have particles, and that's what presents the field. Because it's a charged particle flying through space, creating a field exactly like the same thing goes through a wire. Now, as this hit it, you can see it's stepping down, and it's creating a mini field. And that mini field, I'm sure, has a mini particle in it, or that may even become this size. I don't know. But there's an impact, I can tell you that. I can see it. I can see it now is reforming into one of these, probably. Something similar to this. I can see that structure is occurring. I can see this is a spinning tiny one of these. It's a little more energized. It's a white, I don't know if that's a reflection from here or that is its own generation of white, which I could see it probably is, because that seems to be a little more energized. And you know, I want to say something else too. You see these colors here? These are lepton colors. They've talked about this, you know, there's particles that are mini particles within particles that are leptons. Now, I don't know if they see it in the same way I see it, but I am seeing exactly the same colors you're talking about that are the leptons. There's only like 3 lepton colors. Maybe 4, I'm not sure. But anyway, that's a whole nother issue. However, there is some relation to some theory, but the theory that I'm talking about is not accepted theory. And mine is obviously not accepted. But you're looking at what I'm showing you, and if they can show you something that presents a better picture of what's going on, I want to see it. And I would suspect you want to see it if you're looking for truth. And if you're not looking for truth, you might as well just go do whatever what you're doing and forget about it, because this is going to change the way you're going to see things. If I'm right, which I have the evidence to support that I'm right, you're going to find out that it's nothing like you thought it was. And you're never going to get there from here, because you're going to have to start from scratch again. Once you're here thinking, oh, I got to follow Einstein, I got to follow Maxwell, I got to follow this guy and that guy and Hubble, and every one of them base their theories on flawed basic principles. You cannot get there from here. All right, at some time I'm going to point about the right-hand rule. You see the little particle? That's I'm going to say that's the electron. That's the particle. And as it's coming here, it's spinning to the right, which means that particle will drift to the left. We're also seeing the disk formations collapsing as they come forward. The particles are like little tubes of spinning light, and they create fields around them. And this is what we captured, and they step down as they come out of the accelerator. They step down for two waves, and then they start to reform. And I'll show you what those look like in their most basic form here. You see that? Now, my theory, the only thing I can come up with a theory for, I'm saying that's a particle. Or you say whatever you want to call it. That thing is a thing that is spinning through space. And that thing has some kind of energy. And the thing has a white part and a black part. So that tells me there's energy here and no energy here. All right? That's a spike and that's a spike. What does that tell me? It tells me there's compression here and compression here of the power of the energy. And why do I say that? Because it's giving off some kind of and you can see it. You can see it's a darkish side, a light side and a dark side. What happens is as electricity is crushed, it creates a big field around it, and I've shown that in the accelerated light. It's an enormous field it creates. So what is going to be the output of that? If it was crushed in the central point of here, it would shoot a spike out here. So what am I saying? I'm saying this might be a torus. And why would I say that? Because toruses have a neck on the inside. They have cavities, and then they have a neck. And the torus spins inside itself and then through itself and back and forth, all this business. Now, what would happen if you were trying to force electricity through that neck? All right? If you're an electrical engineer, you're going to understand any restriction to the flow of electricity causes an increased magnetic field. That's it. It suppresses it. It says, hey, you're coming through here? Oh, no, 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 no. This is a restriction. And it builds a field to force the flow backwards. Not only does it force it backwards, just says, okay, you can't come here. It says, I'm going to push you. And it pushes at up to 10 times the applied incoming voltage. So let's say it's coming in here at 12 volts. It's going to come back out of here at 120 because it's going to collapse that field. What does that do? It's going to go back in and try to find a hole to dump that stuff into, which is the cavity of the other side of the torus. And then it's going to try to go back and snake its through back into the neck again, and it's going to flip-flop, flip-flop, flip-flop. That's the only thing I can come up to account for this particular structure. That's all I can see. Now, that's called capacitive and inductive reactance. The inductance occurs when it tries to force itself through the neck. The capacitance occurs when it has a hole to pump back into. I'm going to tell you a funny story. I know this is a fact because of the collapse of a magnetic field forces up to 10 times the reverse applied, what they call electromotive force. So I'm having my wife hold on to a solenoid one day, right? It's 12 volts. I said, yeah, that's 12 volts, not going to hurt her. So I take the wires and I wrap them together and I say, all right, I hold these two wires together and these two wires. She says, I can't touch those wires. They're going to shock me. I said, no. It's 12 volts. I say, here, touch the battery. She touches the battery. It's 12 volts. So, okay. So she wraps the wires. And I energize the solenoid, and it clicks in, and I say, "Ooh, that's good." So I set off the electricity, and the field has now saturated and has filled up brightly. When I shut the electricity off, boom! It dumped back into her hand at 120 volts, and she jumped up in the air, kind of mad at me. Anyway, that sort of proves what I'm saying. That's a real life incident. Now, we have so many pictures of light and so many interactions that are just staggering, and it's all done because of the way Rodney did this. He stumbled upon something that really shows exactly the nature of light, and you can only do it with the correct lighting. Moisture in the environment is pretty necessary, I believe. I'm not 100% sure of that, but it seems to be. And these are also seen in outer space. John Glenn saw the exact same particles, exactly the same particles as he was entering into the sunlight. And they also saw it in the tether incident in 1996, where they couldn't explain all the particles coming in. We're coming into sunlight. And then of course, they flood out eventually because they overcome in the sunlight. This is not something that cannot be explained in every single way, and I will do that now. Now, as you may or may not know, I started Mud Fossil University as a response to the academic intransigence to any kind of any kind of scientific work that's not done within their confines. So I sent all my stuff off to all universities expecting some kind of response, never got one for years. So, and there's a lot of other research that I've done as well, and now that has also all been avoided. So I'm sure I'm been talking about that during the course of this discussion. And I did want to mention one thing. I believe this was done by Harvard. We sent, of course, to Harvard and Max Planck and you know, every one of them, literally, our research, Yale and so forth, and nobody ever responded. But I did notice, this is, you know, I showed you our picture of light and how the particle is seen and the tubes are seen, and as it cascades off to the side, because this is the center of the Venturi and so forth. Well, Harvard did an experiment. Now, I don't know if it has anything to do with we sent them our stuff several years ago, or at least a couple of years ago. But I just noticed this not long ago. They have something almost identical to this, and very similar. See, look at the trails down here are the same as these trails here. And their trail in the center, though, is coming through not a Venturi. They're coming through a graphene plate here of wires. However, they don't realize it apparently. They have created a set of Venturis, which gives them a whole batch of these different little blobby looking stuff. Now, we had one singular Venturi, so we got a nice crisp response. They are going through this grid work. Now, they're trying to find graphene atoms or something. I don't know really what they're planning to do out of here, but they have created virtually the same patterns that we have created under the same circumstances. So they have really validated our work. I mean, you can see it. If you can't see that, I don't know what to say. That's exactly the same thing that we have. They're using the same electron gun. That's an electron gun. That's not, that's light. It's an electron gun. Electrons are light. So I don't know what else to say. What I'm getting at is it's totally avoided. They don't understand really. I don't think they understand what they're doing. I got to be perfectly honest with you. Any of them. None of them have responded. Now, whether they're hiding in the woods doing this, I don't know. But they're not paying any attention to the stuff that we sent. Nobody's asked for any information about the Venturi. Or I mean, it's so simple though that a kid could figure this out in 5 minutes. It's less than $100 worth of stuff that we used to do this work. And that's when I went and bought some prisms and stuff too. You can accelerate light for less than $50. Maybe CERN will send me a check for the balance. Okay, back to the paper. Now that you have seen the different demonstration of the light and acceleration and the disks and the Higgs and the bosons, all of this. Now, I'm going to just run through this as quickly as I can. I don't want to take up too much of your life, so let's go in with this. So we know we're replacing the neutrons with electrons. It's flooding the nucleus, so there is no neutrons. The electrons crush into the positives, which are the protons, until they can no longer accept them, and then they begin to radiate out in the orbitals. Now, electrons are negative particles and are light, heat, electricity, fields, and more. The heat is the same thing. Cold is the same thing. Neutrons do not exist. There are no neutral particles at all. Neutrons are actually masses of electrons that flood the nuclear core consisting of positive protons. So the nuclear core has positive protons. The electrons flood it until they cannot accept any more. Then they begin to come out. So once the core is stabilized with an equal mass of electrons versus the protons, the orbitals begin to form because they fill up the center and it says, hey, we got all we need. And the new electrons coming in, so what do you want me to do? I say, stay out there, just stay exactly where you are. You're going to stay 3 angstrom units away, which is the tiny little distance. I'm just saying these things. But you're going to stay this distance away from me, and you cannot come any further away, and you stay there. And then it says, well, what happens if other guys want to come? You tell them to stay 6 angstrom units away from you. And then if there's more come, they go off further. And that's how the orbitals form. So once the core is stabilized, the orbitals form. The protons in the core's positive mass continues, though, still to attract more electrons, even though the core is full already. They're still going to try to pack in there. They just still want to get there. And I can show you that in magnetic toys. You look up tractor beam magnets. You will blow your mind. They go, boop, they just lock right in there. You shake them all around and they stay like they're in a tractor beam. Now, the excess electrons are now repelled, but they're still attracted and they form patterns called orbitals. Right? The patterns only continue until the atom fills the required shells in these orbitals to equal the core's positive pull, and at some point it drifts off, and that's where things bond out in that region. Now, the electrons are held at their quantum distance by an exact magnetic containment field. It's exact every time. If you have a certain number of protons, every single time the electrons will fall into that pattern. It's just going to happen. There is no option. All right, the patterns only continue until the atoms fill their cores. The electrons are held to quantum distance, exact distances depending upon the number of positives in the core. The core proton's attraction pulls electrons tight, boom, grabs them tight, until the masses equal out in charge value, and then you have your snowball in the center. Once the core is full, it repels additional electrons with repulsion to a quantum distance. Just like I said before, we're tight in here. We're no more coming in. We'll keep those guys exactly a certain distance away. The quantum distance of electrons is exact for each exact number of protons, as I said before. There will never, ever, ever be less electron mass than proton mass. The only way you can do that is to end up with anti-gravity, and that is when you have a nuclear bomb, and I'm going to explain that in detail. All right? You can have way more electrons in the core than you have protons, and that happens in they thought they were all extra neutrons. No, they're not. They're extra electrons. So it's just a huger snowball with lesser and lesser marbles in the center, and because of the forces against every other part of each other. So the electrons are going to try to fight each other. The protons are going to try to pull everybody in. It's a mass of fighting going on in that nuclear core. And I believe that's what I was showing you in that little particle that looked like a little atomic particle. I mean, it does. All right, now, there will never be less, okay? There's always at least the same number of neutrons, they say, but at least the same number of electron mass to protons in my scenario. Okay, so here we come up to here now. There will be more electron mass to proton mass as they become complex and larger, as I just said. These things keep coming, I cannot stop them. All right, the magnetic fields generated by charged particles pushing resting negative electrons. So there's a negative particles just floating all around in here. And if you come in here in a dry region, you will collect them on your body. They're just floating around. They want to be attached to something. Those are called ether particles, and they're electrons unattached looking to find a home. And if they can find one that will attract it, they will go to it. That's how those work. So, those also become magnetized in the fields when particles fly through there, and we see it as light. You'll see in a second. Earth is continually bombarded by these electrons, which we call sunlight. Because these particles are free electrons, the sunlight, there is always an excess of these electrons available. They're always all over the place. Plants grab them, they hit things, they slap you in the face and turn your face red. All right. Free, non-bonded extra electrons are what is known as ether. That's what I was just talking about, the particles floating around in the air that can attach to you as static and so forth. And it is also the ionosphere. So why would that happen? Because Earth has enough electrons. The sun floods us like pouring tons and tons and tons of water on something that can't absorb anymore. And eventually it collects way out in the ionosphere. It says, can I get down there? I said, nah, they all got too many down there already. He said, what do you want to do? Let's just hang out there. And you have a ton of negative particles in the ionosphere, and that is where they had the problem with the tether incident. And you could see the particles in space are exactly like the spinning little particles I'm showing, the fields. And it only happens during sunlight and sunrise and sunset, because that is when the darkness makes them show up. All right? And that's how Rodney got it done too. All right, the ethereal resting electrons float in the air, and they attach to moisture and other things. That's what I was just saying. So if you walk through there, they might attach on you, and you get a static charge on you. You touch an electric thing, and you get a shock. All right. Now, there's also this ether is inside of conductors. There's extra electrons inside of conductors. That's why they flow. The little negatives are going zip. All right. When magnetic forces are applied, they affect the negative electrons in the ether. So they're always going to be affected. Negatives push against other negatives. Right? They push against them, which makes them exhibit and show up as energy. Right? Light particles can be accelerated in a Venturi slit. I showed you that. There's absolutely no question. And it is because of compression, and I photoed them. As the electrons crush into the Venturi, they display an obvious speeding up. You can see it. The only way you can miss that is to have your eyes closed. The fast electrons hitting unrestricted space creates the white electron Cherenkov radiation glow. And I showed that as it comes out the other side of the accelerator. Light is a spinning particle, acts like a liquid. I showed that. How it comes through the little accelerators. It showed you that it looks like a liquid flowing, but it isn't. It's a particle spinning. As the light particles exit the Venturi, they are in chaos, and they are in an atomized plasma white state. They're all saying, get out of my region, get away from me, and pushing, and it's just energy, heat and energy and light, and it creates enormous magnetic fields. The atomized particles violate each other's magnetic regions, become energetic. The white energetic particles step down quickly into spinning fields around the particles as they return into unrestricted space. All right, outside the other side of Venturi. These fields have the polarized magnetic field pattern of current passing through a wire. They're identical. There's this round circle of particles which pass around a wire, and they can be shown by using iron filings. They do identical, same pattern, and they line up in a circle right around it, plus minus, plus minus, plus minus. They just never really fully realized it. These fields have the polarized magnetic field pattern of current passing through a wire, identical. Fields are photoed in the air in great detail. I showed you with the dots, dot, 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 dot. They didn't just fall that way for accident. Think of some other way that could have happened. Those dots are because the particles in the air have become polarized like magnetic fields, iron filings. All right? And I showed all the characteristics shown very, very clearly. The fields are separated from each other unless one particle is faster than the others, which I showed that happening, one coming faster. A very fast particle in the atomized output can impact another violently. I showed you that. Two fields of light particles impacting can give off a mini light particle in a mini field, and I photoed that. The field of polarized ether surrounds a light ray, which I photoed, which is a negative electron charged particle. I mean, Rod photoed all these. These are Rod Warren's photos. But when I say I photoed, I don't really mean that. I did a lot of photos myself, but Rod, just nobody can beat his. So this is what I'm showing. All right, the charged particle carriers. The charged particle carries the field with it like a sonic boom, but it is a disk of ether dots. There's just a field of dots. They call it a Higgs field. And that surrounds a charged particle that flows through the air, just like a sonic boom. Stays right with the particle, which is the jet. All right? The charged field carrier might be the boson part of the Higgs boson, and I believe that's because these looks exactly what they say they look like, and they should look like. The fields photoed are from the light that appeared accelerated Cherenkov radiation, exactly what it looks like, exactly what you expect. The light ether dotted disks, field separations, compacted after, let's see, the light ether dotted disks, the light ether dotted disk fields, separations compacted after acceleration as expected. All right, okay, I'm missing those different, like rings. Let's put that. I have to change that. The light rings of dotted particles. Anyway, they showed up exactly how you would expect them to show up because they look the same as the iron filings. All right, so I'll fix that later. The light particle spins to the right, indicates the drift to the left as it travels forward. That's just exactly what we saw. All matter and light and energy contains electrons. Now listen to this. This is the key right here. All matter, everything. There is nothing that does not contain electrons. Nothing. Everything has electrons. Everything has electrons. So light going through the outer space where there is nothing but light, because there is no full, complete matter, it has all congregated into masses here and there of positive matter. But in space, there is nothing but particles of negativeness. But they still are the electrons. Now, wherever matter collects, it also has the negatives, because negatives will swarm it and try to collect on there. There is no positiveness is just hanging around. They will find negatives instantly. The only time you will see a positive hanging around on this earth that I know of is a nuclear bomb. When that goes off, it crushes all the negatives into a region surrounding those positives, and those negatives are so unhappy that each other is in their regions, they leave violently in an extreme white, brilliant light, and then the positive mass that's left over is thrown from the earth straight into the air. And I go over this very, very well in my videos. That is anti-gravity. And then the mushroom cloud sucks back into that mass, brilliantly energizing it back into life again as a complete matter mass, which has electrons. Because as it flies through the air, straight up in the air, there is no electrons with it. It is a positive mass at that point, and it has achieved anti-gravity. I go over this in extreme, excruciating detail. All right, so we got all matter and light and energy contains electrons, and all electrons are pulled to protons. All right, they're all trying to find protons. Even if you've got a ton of electrons already attached to the protons, more of them want to get in there, and they collect somewhere in the vicinity, and they are held at bay. Gravity is this positive pull to all matter. It pulls all matter. It pulls other stuff that has electrons surrounding their positives. It pulls electrons, and that is all matter, including light. But light in a vacuum of space does not hit anything because there's nothing complete out there. It is all gathered somewhere. The proton stuff is all gathered somewhere. So there's nothing out there to go. So they stay away from each other and they cascade through there. So the light is electrons thrown from violent masses like the sun and the stars, or flashlights or lasers or so forth. As light particles spin through space, they stay away from each other as they are all negatives. These particles become visible only upon collision with complete matter that has positive protons. That could be at the space station or space debris, or the gases in our environment or the Earth. But it has to have something with protons. They will not interact with each other in space. They are dark matter and dark energy. As the electrons collide, they are reduced to vibration. So in other words, electrons collide. Everything is covered with electrons. There is nothing in the universe that is complete matter that is not completely coated in electrons. There's no positives sticking out of the top. They're all like a big rubber balloon surrounding matter. And when the incoming electrons come, they hit that balloon and they do two things. They vibrate that balloon, which is heat, or they bounce one off of that balloon or themselves, which is light. and that's another electron. It'll go somewhere else to create heat or light in another cascade. Now, until they reach matter with nucleuses in the core, the electrons are dark, but they still have mass and energy. They're spinning through space. Zzz, nobody to work with, nobody to bang into, nobody to smash off of. So they stay away. They say, hey, you over there, can I work with you? No, 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 you stay away from me. I'm a negative too. And he said, anybody out there? Yeah, go down and hit the space station or one of those planets over there. So that's what happens. The guys come down and bang. Until they reach matter, there's nothing for them to do. They're just going around, but they're still there. They're still like dark guys running around. So what is that? Light is dark energy. Light is dark energy. And it is also dark matter because it's a particle. It's an electron. Now they claim an electron has 0.00055 atomic mass units, something like that. Well, that's matter. And it's energy. When it smashes into something, it lights up, so I know it's energy. Or even if it was just floating around and collected on you, and when it jumped off of you towards Earth, that's energy. So it's got potential no matter what. So as it travels in the non-nucleated space of the vacuum of space, it's just dark matter and dark energy. Space is filled with these electrons. We call them sunlight and starlight, and it's only seen when it hits our eyes or it hits the Earth to warm it up and so forth, but it's always there. And that is what they called the ether in the days of old. Now, nuclear bomb compresses all of this matter. It's so compressed that when it can't stay in its own regions, because everybody's in somebody else's region, poof, they go away. You end up with a brilliant light. Then what happens? The nuclear core becomes a positive mass, and it is repelled from Earth, which is anti-gravity. And that's clearly seen in atomic blast. I don't know how you can miss it. As nuclear mass rises, it draws the electrons back in because it's got to get back to neutrality, of electron neutrality. All right? So it has to draw them all back in. That's what you see as a mushroom cloud. And then it becomes complete matter again, but not until it gets way up into the air. And you can see it glowing like crazy up there. That is the glowing of electron flooding a positive nucleus. Right? Sonoluminescence is another form of electron flooding, and it is electrons flooding a tear in the space inside complete matter. And usually you do it inside of water. And inside of water, you can rip the molecules apart and create a void in the water where there is nothing. There's nothing at all. And it completely floods with electrons, which is raw energy. It goes up to millions and millions of degrees. And they know this. It's hotter than the sun, they say. I don't know if that's true. But it's raw energy, I can tell you that, and I show that too. And the slow-mo guys did a firecracker underwater explosion. You can see it. It's very, very obvious. And I have videos on. Every one of these I have videos on. So there's nothing here that you cannot find on my Mud Fossil University site. Now, so sonoluminescence tears a void literally in the water where there is nothing. And it has something to do with hydrophobic, hydrophilic. It creates an open space, and when that space opens up, all the light floods in. And it fills up, and then when it collapses, because water will collapse, it has nowhere to go, and woof, what an explosion. So the sono void is flooded instantly with raw electrons. And it's seen in the water explosions and other experiments with the frequency manipulation. They've done star in a jar and this and that. Now, static electricity is free ether electrons. Static electrons, they're just floating around. Where do you think they come from? How do you get a static electricity on you? Where does it come from? How come you only get it when it's dry? How come you don't get it when it's wet? Where does the static go to when it jumps off of you? All right? These are the things that are very obvious. The static collects on you because there are particles floating around that are negative particles that want to be attached to something that says, hey, I can use some negative particles. When the air is dry, there's nobody to say there. There's nobody out there to say, come here, I want you. I said, well, where do I go? I said, well, there's no wetness out there to attach to you. He said, well, there's a guy just walked by me. He's kind of wet, and we'll jump on him for a while. So they jump on you and you walk around. And if you're insulated from anything that brings that thing to ground, these particles on you that collect these negatives, when you touch something that is attached to the earth ground, which will always take negatives, poof, they go in a bolt of lightning away from you. That is static electricity. Earth is a soup of extra electrons that flow as light, heat, cold, electricity, all the same interaction. It's an electron in motion. All right, the conclusion and final statements. All right, what I have just described is universal theory. That is universal theory in a nutshell. Everything works once you get rid of the neutrons. Every single thing works. It's a whole long thought to be a must, but impossible to achieve with incorrect standard atomic models. You can't get there from here. You cannot get there until you start from a new here. All right, so here's the here you got to start from. So, therefore, if this electron flood theory is correct, which it absolutely is, nothing can be understood in physics until electron flood and no neutrons is addressed. They can look and ponder and calculate and cipher and build all these things at CERN and all this insane thing. They do this for 100 million years. They're never even going to have a clue. They're just going to become more confused. Explain this to me. Then go about your life. If you can, good enough for you. If you can't, you better start thinking again. So physicists are simply making up extremely complex, convoluted fantasies to avoid the truth that constructs of the past physicists. They're completely wrong at the core. And once they started at the core, this is the problem with the rigidity in science. You are not allowed to think beyond someone else's thought. Once it's accepted, you better not fight with that or you will be destroyed. That's what's held back. And even Max Planck said that science advances one funeral at a time. Which is true. I mean, the guy's got to die off. I mean, Velikovsky, he was so right on the money, and they still got him in a box somewhere. I mean, of course he's died, but I mean, he was the absolute best, and they destroyed him. His book was on the bestseller list for something like 11 weeks in a row, and they forced him to take it off of the bookshelves. That academics did because they were so upset about it. And then everything he said turned out to be right. And they still haven't acknowledged it. So, anyway, you don't want to make waves in academia if you want to get your paycheck. And you have to make a paper, they call it, publish or perish. All right? You better publish something. If you publish something that they don't like, you're going to perish anyway. So now you're in a box that you cannot escape from, my professor friends. And I am here to save you and open that box for you. I'm cutting the tape open. That's that heavy-duty tape they put on those boxes. You cannot get on it. You almost got to get a stiletto out to get into some of these boxes with this tape. And you are in one of these boxes, my friend. And if you want to get into reality, which I expect you would want to, I would expect you would want to. I would expect somebody would have stepped up. But nobody has. In 6 years of presenting all of this unimpeachable evidence of not only this is only within the last 3 or 4 years. I have the mud fossil information. It's all DNA certified and everything about our ancient past. Totally overthrows their theories of everything, really, literally everything. And of course, that is not allowed. Yale won't allow me to show them the stuff. Harvard won't allow me to show them the stuff. Nobody will allow me to show them anything. They don't want to know about it. They won't return my calls. They won't return my emails. And I don't think that's right. And I would think that's a fiduciary issue myself. I would think they'd have to address this if it's DNA certified, which it is, and the specimens are available, which they are, and the CAT scans were done, which they were. And the anatomist verified them, which he did. I would say, and I have so much evidence that's just so phenomenal that they can't accept because it's too much for them. But anyway, here's a conclusion. This is universal theory, and it's long thought is necessary. So if this theory is correct, nothing's understood. I presented evidence, literal evidence, to support every statement and allegation I made, until this is challenged by the ones that we now trust to look for truth instead of ignoring truth. I personally will not respect anything from experts, from academics, or any teacher whatsoever. If a professor professes wisdom, that professor must address what negates that professor's authority to profess. Until then, ignoring this challenge negates a professor's status. And you should address this to your professors and ask them, what about this? And let me show you something else you should ask them about. All right, you should show this to your professors, and you should think about this deeply yourself. What I've shown you here is a dead, decomposing body and how the effluent runs off it. Now I want to show you what is in the desert and what everybody is avoiding. I'm trying to make this evident. All right, they were enormous, and they were just exactly what was written. As spectacularly insane as that sounds, it's true. This is a dragon. That's his head, that's his neck, runs all the way down into his body here, and that's his tail. These are his legs. It was a red dragon. That's the redness that had leaked away from. This is a giant fish that dragon was attacking. Oh, the guy's crazy. He's going insane. Well, let's just see how insane I am. It's how insane you will have to be to just dismiss this. That, I am saying, is a dragon's head. I discovered this several years back, and I have been pushing this to people to understand dragons were exactly what they said. With the fluty little things going down their side, the little fuzzy things, the dragon scaled throat going down, the flashy red eye. Whoops, this I do want to explain. I was wrong about the eye. It appears the eye is right here. Somebody said to me, and protested my claiming that, and I agree. It could very well be here. I have to look at it carefully. That just came in today, and they said, no, you're wrong about the eye. And I guess this is what he's claiming is the, I don't know, I have to look at it close. But anyway, that's a minor deal. That's a dragon, I'm telling you that right now. And spitting out stuff to kill things and burn things up, and it is nasty, nasty, nasty stuff. You see that? That's what he spit at that fish, and that is a fish. I don't care what you... By the way, that stuff there is the same stuff you see in snake venom. So you can laugh all you want. That is a fish, and it was written that there was a Leviathan that had a fight with the dragon, and God came down and slew them both. So you can laugh all you want. Now let's go back up to this dragon and see his dragon-scaled throat as you chuckle. All right? This is not a rift, little cleavage in the rocks and so forth, unless the rocks in this area happen to be dragon scaled, which they do. Okay, that's not just rocks. Geologists, they're just rocks. It's not rocks, and that is not just a valley. That is a throat of a dragon. Not only that, this dragon died not long ago. You see this? That's the blood running off a decomposing, rotting dragon that fell to the earth not long ago. You show this to any coroner. They'll know exactly what this is. It's a thing that died and it leaked away. I have shots of this. I'll show them. I've shown this over and over and over and over, and nobody seems to think that they can get their hands around this, because this is like literally entire Morocco all the way up to the Mediterranean, and I'm telling you for a fact, if you can't see this, that's his guts, that's the legs, this is his tail. And if that tail has dragon scales in it, well, then I'm going to say that's his tail. And guess what? It has dragon scales in it. And that is blood. That is what happens with blood. And here is the leakage from that dead area in his body. Alright, so if you want to laugh, laugh. But I'm showing you what's reality, and they will never, ever, 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 ever understand geology, space, earth, anything until they deal with this reality. And this is what chafes me for 6 All right, I'm not going to get crazy on it because this is why you notice I was kind of frustrated in my tone, which I am. I'm frustrated as hell. I got to be honest with you. This has been I did a lot of work. Now I have DNA tests and CAT scans and specimens of giant human beings. That thing there is so big. This dragon, if you were a human being even a mile tall, this thing wouldn't even know you were on him. You understand where I'm going with this? This is, it's beyond the comprehension of a normal human mind. They just can't get to it yet. But you got to start. You got to get there. It's real. Go on Google. You see this. This is not for me. I have all videos showing all this stuff. There's nothing that is hidden, and there's nothing I will ever hide, and there's nothing that should be hidden, and there's nothing that should be ignored. And that is the case. And that's why I was so, I'm concerned. I spent a lot of money. I DNA tests. I show you the DNA tests. Hold on a second. There's 3 DNA tests in here. And this was done, about 3 years ago. And this was expensive, and it was all done with, bacterial DNA extracted from each submitted mud fossil, Genie, clean agent DNA extraction kit. They know what they're doing. This is ancient stuff. This is not like a swab of this or that. These were deeply taken samples. There was 3 of them, a 36-inch finger tip. 3 feet wide, a fingertip. It's probably 220 feet tall, that person, and it's a human fingertip. It was, it came back human. Then you got a lung that was a human lung. That's just a normal size lung. And then you got a mud fingertip, which is about 8 or 9 inches long. That's just a fingertip. And that was, maybe 50 feet, 40, 50 feet tall guy. Now, all of this stuff was very, very, very well done. Took months to do it. They did it with all these different degrees and temperatures and cycles and yada, 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 whatever this is. And, so this was not like a simple quickie job, what it is, and they did it. It had negative controls and all that. And, 2 of them were very dense. 1 of them was not as dense, but they all had the mitochondrial DNA, and they were all the same. And it was done in 2 different labs, in the Homo sapien mitochondrial cytochrome G and the Homo sapien mitochondrial D. And that's what they check for in this particular type of testing. And this was certified. It's not some quickie thing that was just a swab on the edge. Like I said, this was drilled into the arterial passageways, because I understand how these things are. They're the exact same as you and me. I know what the blood vessels are. I know what the arteries are, and so forth. So anyway, this was all done, and there's no question about it. I have the samples here, and I have them all over the place. So just let's come back to reality one of these days, and I will be glad. Yeah, see that lung right there? That was DNA tested. That's a human lung. It's the same size as a human lung. The one over there leaked blood all over. The one to the right of that, right in front of that little motor, that's a distal phalanges. You can see the distal phalanges, black carbon silhouette on, they call it there, and the vein and artery are in the back, and on the side is where the vein didn't blow out. That's it. And that's been DNA tested. I mean, I got so much stuff that's all reality, and they just won't pay attention to it. So I believe it's time for this to end. And until they start to pay attention to what has been presented, and I have no respect for anybody that won't stand up for themselves. And you are the ones that are the unfortunate victims. If you're in school right now, I got attacked me the other day. Oh, I'm getting my PhD in this, that, in geology. I said, well, I got to be honest with you, my friend, you wasted your time. He went insane. And then he realized he did. Because if you can't address this, and all you're getting from these geology things is names, this is forsterite, and that's smectite, and that is tectonite, and this is this and that. Well, they're just telling you something to remember. This is a red ball, this is a blue ball, this is a green ball, this is a black ball. What did you learn? Oh, the black ball comes from a black ball factory. The green ball comes from a green ball factory. And they make up where that factory is in Disneyland somewhere. And that factory has these little bubbling things coming out of it. And the other factory has these little squishy things coming out of it. And that's why it's green and the other one's blue. They're just making up. I don't know how they come up with the things they come up. You should try to figure out what a smectite is. Oh my God. It's a vein. It's a vein. And they come up with the circular crystallization compacting the inner vascularization. I mean, it was just unbelievable. Anyway, what you need to do is to get to reality. To get to reality, you got to start and confront what is being put forward. Otherwise, nobody in this world will ever be able to understand even the most basic things. And even health. Health is totally impacted by mud fossil theory here. Absolutely, 100%. The transition metals, they do not understand whatsoever. I understand them intimately because they collect in certain places in the body in extremely obvious places, and they should be in the correct quantities. This is why we are unhealthy. And the enzymes that are created by bacteria are the things that create those transition metals, the transition metals in your blood, the transitions in that electronic movement, which goes back to what I started with, was the electrons and so forth, is the reason that you can carry products around in your body and remove gases. That is a singular one electron transition. It's a lightly held pH-driven transition that carries oxygen and glucose and vitamins and all the things you need to support your life, and removes all the things that you need that will kill you. And if you don't have those enzymes, you are not going to have the transition metals. And if you don't have the enzymes, it's because you don't have the bacteria. If you don't have the bacteria, it's because your gut is not working correct. And if your gut is not working correct, it means those bacteria are either dead, or not active, or not able to do their job the way they should. And that is usually a response to antibiotics and things in your environment that destroy those workers for you. All right, that's my last word. I said it was my last word. I was wrong. I did not substantiate my claim about tissue variegation and transition metals, as well as transition metal transportation in blood. And I will do that right now. These are transition metal colors. Now, there are many more transition metals. There are approximately 100 almost. Now, you have uranium in you, you have iridium in you, you have virtually every one of the transition metals. And you see these little pluses, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. That means that they want to give and take electrons in different molecular configurations. That is the nature of transportation of products in your body. These metals move through your heart and lungs, as I will show you, and attach to different products in your body by grabbing them with one of these little, just grabbing them with a little electron. Then they carry it to a place where the pH is different, and that means the electron content is different, and that means they will give that up. And at that point, they will become wanting to take on a different type of chemistry, and that is the expended oxygen, and now it's carbon dioxide, and in the blood specifically, that grabs a hold of it, comes back to the heart, and then it is flushed out of the heart in a carbonic acid, I believe. Now, let's go back to the transition metals. If they are in your blood in the correct quantities, your things will move around your body just the way they're supposed to. And that means you are healthy, you are not chronically ill, you don't feel tired, you don't have itchy skin, your toenails don't get fungus, you don't become attacked because you have the minerals and metals and products in your body that can feed the army of protective creatures, literally, that live in your body. The bacteria, there's more of you is not you than is you in your body. Bacteria is more than half of you, approximately, they say. And, you know, I'm just throwing out these figures, but that's what they say. And I can fully understand that because your gut is where you process all this stuff. And if you don't have the correct bacteria, you will not have the correct metals, because bacteria creates enzymes. Enzymes are a literal prescription, just like you went to a doctor and said, all right, the guy needs some copper sulfate down in his testicles, wherever you need it. And a bacteria says, oh, I'll go get some. It writes a prescription, says, we need some CUS207, and the next thing you know, those molecules go together and they head down there as an enzyme to break down anything that has that particular molecule in it that it will bind to. Then it will deliver that to the blood to go and do the job of bringing out that copper sulfate or whatever the product is to wherever it's needed in the body. And it is doing 24/7. You can't stop it. It's perfect. It was divinely conceived. And now, proof du jour of exactly what I am saying about transition metals. If you looked at that heart, you would say that is just a brown looking tissue heart. Well, you know that there's ventricle walls and there's little heartstrings and there's an aorta and fascia and muscle and all that business, but it looks the same. I can't tell you what that is. That different than that? Not to me too much. Or that from that? I don't see much of a difference or that. However, what if we broke it down to what these particular tissues would want to become stable? Because everything, once you're dying, you either become stable or you explode because you don't have the right things to attach to you to become stable. So if you were in blood and all the transition metals that were in blood were available, you would become an opal. And I will show you how opals use those transition metals to become spectacular. Now let's see if I can find my opal heart. And they don't even know these are opal hearts. The people that are LMNO. Opal heart. There it is. And the people that are actually mining these, I don't think they realize what they have, because I tried contacting them. They thought I was nuts. Not specifically these people, but other ones. Anyway, and this it comes from the Yoa region in Australia. It's a high ground compared to where they find the marine fossils, the clamshells, nautiluses, and all the things. Because every opal is from some biological creature. Of course, everything is. So, anyway, these happen to be fossilized in blood, which I have a couple of videos on Australia, and it is soaked in blood, soaked, drenched, submerged, absolutely slaughtered with blood. All right, now let's get back to this. I said the tissues are variegated. Variegated means they're separate. They're distinct. They are different. They don't infringe on each other's territories, because first of all, they have fascia around them, which protects them. Every single thing has fascia around it, even your individual cells. And that is why mud fossils break open in these, wherever the fascia surrounds them. Organs are surrounded by fascia. They pop open. Hearts and lungs and kidneys and all that stuff. I have every one of those in exquisite, perfectly anatomical models, and they have all the different minerals. So anyway, this is a heart. I showed you what a heart was before. You go back and look at the picture. That's where the blood collects. That's blood. It's red. You see all these little tiny particles in there, the different colors, red and green and blue, and the different colors like that. And then you see this tissue here is exactly a certain color, and the little heartstrings are the same color. That tissue needs a certain mineral, metal, transition metal to become stable, and it did, and therefore it became solid as a opal heart rock. And that's what we have here. So we know that all these different tissues have a complexity all of their own. I can't make this thing in a brown. You understand? If this thing was brown, that guy's in trouble. That guy's in deep trouble. Or if it was orange, or if it was pink. That is a key. That's a clue. And what's missing? There's a transition metal missing. Why is a transition metal missing? Was an enzyme missing? Why is an enzyme missing? Was a bacteria missing? Why is a bacteria missing? All you got to do is think like a 2-year-old. And you always get to the answer. But when you give a and you start just going off on these silly tangents, you have to back up what you say, and I do, and this backs it up 100%. That is a heart. The tissues are certainly extremely variegated, muscle, ventricle walls, blood, and you see the transition metals in this blood. See that? It's soaked in transition metals. Those are the carriers that I talked about. If you don't have those, you're sick. And if you don't have the right ones, you're sick. And if you have different colors where you're supposed to have blue and you have green, you're in trouble. And you should be able to figure this out. It's an equation. You're a chemistry set. Right, you're a chemistry set. We really got to pay more attention to this, because this is not just silly and, oh, it's the guy's crazy. No, it's not. So if you can challenge me factually on any single thing that I've said, I would love that. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'll go with that. I could be wrong. As a matter of fact, I was wrong about the dragon's eyeball, I think. We'll find out. You don't get right until you get wrong. And I've been wrong so many times, and now I'm right. So you try to make me wrong, I'll love it. I'll fight every one of you. You know, put up your dukes. I'm ready for you. I'm ready for you. I am ready for you. All right, so, Mr. Professor, come to Mud Fossil University, dispute my claims. Dispute this. Tell your students that I am crazy. Tell your students that what I have presented is wrong. Tell your students that you are more authoritative and expert, and your opinion supersedes my evidence. And see how they will react to that. This is what my frustration is, because I presented this. This is about the 10th time. Well, 10th. This is the 10th time in the last 2 weeks. I mean, it's unbelievable. They just don't respond. I feel like I'm in the caverns of Australia or Utah or the Grand Canyon. I could very well be, and I just didn't. Nobody heard me there either, probably. They're probably there to come out and shoot me. Anyway, they might shoot me in my other arena. Anyway, it's a frustrating endeavor. However, sooner or later, somebody is going to pay attention that has the wherewithal and the chutzpah to stand up and say what is true is true. The emperor has no clothes. If you're real interested in the transition metals, you should look at this, because this is a study done by South African officials, and extremely well done in my mind. And it says the effect of selected metals on the central metabolic pathways in biology. What does that mean, central metabolic? Metabolic means everything that you take in, ingest, and use and burn to create your life. It is literally your life. So they're saying metals affect on your life, and the pathways of the minerals and metals and that drag all these things through your body, which I just explained. So you should see this. This thing is absolutely phenomenal. It's you know, and it talks right here. This is what you take in. This is the metals and whatever you take into your body. This is it. Then it goes to here and it says, well, what happens? Metabolism starts to bioactivate the stuff. You can't eat a rock and it just becomes, it makes you start growing. You have to break it all down, so it has to be bioactivated. Then the second thing is conjugation. That means, in the second conjugation, means it adds together with something. Like I said, that's when the metals add together with something. Then mobilization. That means it's moving around through your bloodstream. That is the transition metals job. But if you have too many or not enough, you got a problem. All right, and then they're looking at it as an issue of too much, because they're looking at it as a hazard. I'm looking at it as these are all exactly correct. Now they're saying, okay, you got to get rid of this way, you got to get rid of that way, get it out of your body. Well, it's supposed to be in your body, and I said at a certain point. And I have a lot of videos about this, and this is where we need a database to find out what bacteria are in the body, what chemicals are in the body, in the blood, in the blood, and what kind of metals are in the blood. So if we're short of some metals, we have too many of them, we're probably missing a bacteria, because that cannot create the enzyme, and it was probably damaged by an antibiotic or some aggression to the digestive system. Even the prep for a colonoscopy causes this kind of issue to some degree. Antibacteria is a devastating thing. I mean, antibiotics, because what that does is it goes in and attacks a cell wall of the entire genus, I believe, because they have a different type of cell wall. So the antibiotics, or penicillin anyway, I believe anyway, I could be wrong, but I think it goes in and it bites a hole in the wall and they all die. And everybody that's in that same genus, which is bacteria, they all die. And I'm sure there's a lot of them in there that are good guys that do the job that you want them to do, and then they're gone. And I know that's a fact too, because I'm very, very sick, and I know people almost died, and there is a lot of people that do die from it. And people are all the time now. Since I've been talking about this, people have been getting me with everything, and I'm sorry for not getting back to a lot of people, because I just don't have time anymore. I can't hold it. But I'm getting things. Well, I had my colonoscopy. I mean, they had taken out their colons, because they could not deal with it, and they were giving them more antibiotics, and they got worse, and then they finally cut the colon out. I've had people that say transplants. I mean, there's so much to this. This is health. This is health. This is the real. I'm telling you right now, what you take in, if you don't process it right, you're sick. I'll close that case.